So, good morning. Great turnout. After the nice party last night by Siemens, I didn't expect this many. So, and my voice is a little hoarse, and it wasn't because I was karaokeing. I was just cheering those on that had enough guts to get up there and do that. So, Harry said I'm an expert, and I have to disappoint you because I certainly am not an expert in wireless, but I have some experts here at the table with me at BASF who have helped us start down the road where we're at, and I think it's just a start as far as wireless goes. I'm going to talk about it more from a management perspective and talk about how our path has taken us and some recommendations. The reason we want to get out here as BASF and talk about wireless is mainly because from a safety standpoint and a security standpoint, we feel that it can really shift the discussion as far as making our plants safer, mainly in the area of personnel accountability as well as security for the sites. But we'll talk about how that then can lead into the other applications, the efficiency applications, and address some of the issues that we have facing us, nice issues. From a standpoint of growth and new plants that are coming online, but also address the demographic issues, which would have come anyways, but are heightened because of the fact that we now have new investments coming online. We're going to have to hire the additional folks in addition to those folks that would have been retiring anyways. So an issue we had is just exacerbated by the capital investment that's coming down the road. So let's see if I can make this thing work. Oh, so there's my bio. I won't get into too much of it. 27 years at BASF, chemical engineering background. Started off as a process engineer for about 6 years, and then moved into manufacturing, and I've been in different roles in manufacturing. I was about 20 years at our Geismar facility, 3 years at our Port Arthur facility, which is a joint venture with Total. And I've been a little over 3 years now in Freeport, and I did a little stint over in Germany for a little over a year back in the early 2000s. And then I'm on lots of boards that take up a lot of my time. So, background on BASF, for folks that don't know it, we call ourselves the chemical company, and there's a reason for it because we believe we are the chemical company, and back when folks were spinning off and maybe having a little bit of an identity crisis, we came out and said, hey, that's who we are. We're the chemical company, and we're proud of it. And so it's a bold statement. We have over 110,000 employees worldwide. We have what we call Verbund sites, which is an integrated site. Essentially, a lot of the co-products, byproducts that are used in one facility are raw material feeds for another. And so we kind of soup the nuts, try and use every part of the molecules that we bring to the site and make some value-added product out of it. And so that's what we call our Verbund sites. We have 6 of those worldwide. Here in the States, we have 2, Freeport and Geismar. Freeport is a little bit south of Houston, and Geismar a little south of Baton Rouge. Port Arthur in between. That's the joint venture that we have with Total. That's a refinery. And I'm going to talk primarily about Freeport. The other location where we have implemented wireless is Port Arthur, and in Geismar we have wireless well underway. So those are the 3 facilities where wireless is being implemented, and it's really our 3 largest facilities in the U.S., and we're starting there. And there's some challenges with those facilities because they're multi-business, what we call UBs, multi-business units, and so in a matrix organization like we have right now, that can create some challenges to overcome because we've got the business units that are trying to reach their own objectives. And as the site manager for a multi-UB site, part of my job is to make sure that we have certainty for the infrastructure and that we have commonality and everybody's kind of marching to the same beat. And so that's some of the challenges that we faced. Was that we had a lot of folks out there that were really trying to jump on wireless and get going, and we kind of had to rein them back a little bit and say, okay, we're going to approach this in a standardized approach rather than let somebody over in this business unit do this thing in their unit, somebody else does it in their unit, and then in the end we've got a system that's got too many different parts and really isn't talking well with one another. So the first thing we had to do was to try and get that under control and rein back the enthusiasm a little bit as we kind of got the systems straightened and get some standards in place. So this pyramid here, is our pyramid for automation. You can see up there on level 1 at the base of the pyramid are the basic functions, and maintenance, alarm management, HMI, better human interfaces, toolkits. Then on the advanced functions, we got security, smart sensors, more operator visualization, and then down below, system advancement. We're going to talk today about the wireless technology, which to some extent can cross into some of these other areas as well. But we're working on wireless technology, and again, part of the reason why we're going down the wireless path is because there are a lot of efficiency gains to be had there. But also primarily, and this is where we're leading it off, is from a safety and a security standpoint. And that's where most of our initial projects were aimed. So top priorities, safety and security. Operational excellence is coming along with that. We have, with the raw material situation in the U.S. with shale gas, most of our plants are in a sold-out condition because we have favorable variable costs. And so from that perspective, every additional pound that you can squeeze out of the plants is sold. Because shale gas, the basic raw material feeds that we have upstream, is making the U.S. plants much more efficient, which, for those of us that were around from before 2010 or 9, that was a very difficult time period for us in the chemical industry because it was flipped around and we were really on the bottom of the heap and really struggling and fighting to make sure that we survived. So it's a very nice issue to have. We love it. It brings a different kind of stress to the situation, but it also gives us opportunities from an efficiency standpoint, from a justification for getting additional efficiencies. And when you overlay that with the demographics, so at our sites, and it's follows the baby boom generation, we've got about 40 or 50% of our folks that are eligible to retire over the next 4 or 5 years. Now, does that mean they will? Maybe, maybe not. Depends what the stock market does and their own choices. But coming in behind them to fill that void, we're going to have to hire folks, new folks that are coming in, and they have different expectations. And the labor supply market's going to be different. We're going to be fighting for talent, and so we see wireless as a way to attract. I've got 4 kids. Those folks, what I call the Xbox generation, that are used to having those toys to play with, the phones constantly in their hands. And so we see it as an advantage to attract new talent. And we also think that they'll take to it like a duck to water. If you've got those systems out there for them, then they'll be able to really pick those up and walk into them. And on the flip side, what we're really working on to smooth that retirement wave out on the back end is we're going to go to much more part-time work. In the past, quite a bit of, especially the shift workers, it was very rigidly in 8 or 12-hour, typically in our industry, 12-hour shifts. And so we're going to be moving to part-time. And what we're hoping to do is to allow the folks that are closer to retirement that perhaps don't want to completely stop working but have the opportunity to work part-time and then see grandkids or travel or whatever they want to do. And that creates some issues for us because I was a shift supervisor for a little over a year or so. And I always liken it to when you're working shift, it's like watching a movie and then you go out and make some popcorn or get a beer or whatever you're going to do, and then you come back and you try and figure out what happened in the movie while you were gone. And that's kind of what it's like working shift. You're working the plant, it's in one situation, and then you leave and you come back 4 days later or whatever the shift schedule is, and you try and figure out what happened in between. Because plants have personalities, what are the issues, what are you going with? And so the communication when you go part-time, if that stretches longer now, if it's 8 days or 2 weeks, in order to be able to address that situation, we need some tools out there, and I think wireless will help that with communication tools and some of the other things that we can do to make sure that we remember our rounds, we know exactly where we're supposed to go with the handhelds. You can look back and see what the historical ranges are when you're out there doing your rounds. So there's a number of tools that can come out with the wireless that will help us address the part-time. The other thing we're going to do from an industry standpoint is moving towards, if you look at the diversity in the workforce, especially in the technician ranks, it tends to be male-dominated. Historically, the jobs have changed. You know, they're not the dragging hoses and opening big valves anymore. It's more troubleshooting and technology. And so we want, because we're going to have a labor shortage issue, we want to be able to attract more diversity and go after the 52% of the population that's really woefully underrepresented in our shift ranks. And to do that, we need some flexibility also in our shifts. You know, my wife is a nurse, and if you look at the nursing profession, they've done that. They've been able to attract more females, despite the fact that it's a 7-day, 24-hour-a-day operation. We want to be able to do that as well, because we need to attract that diversity to our workforce, and we need to be able to have the flexibility. And again, we think wireless tools, in the same way as stretching out the retirement wave for the seniors that are getting close to retirement, having more flexible shifts for the females in the that have after-school activities, or kids are out for summer, and we've got to be able to do some things. So we think wireless will be able to help us address that. The more flexible we can get with our tools, and the security in the wireless will be able to help us overlay all that. So the issues that we have right now, and it's always a problem when you have existing plants, is trying to justify infrastructure. Essentially is what you have, and trying to get infrastructure justified is a difficult thing, especially for existing facilities. For new plants, what we're doing is we're wrapping that into the standards for the new brownfield plants that we're writing. We're just like a pipe racks and other infrastructure distributed control systems. The wireless is going to become part of the standard that we're looking at for those plants, and it's much easier to put in on the front end than it is on the back end and get justified. And I talked about the workforces tomorrow. And of course, efficiency improvements, we're talking about asset effectiveness there primarily, and asset effectiveness tools. And again, a lot of what we can do in the field with writing work orders and making sure that work orders are done right there in the field. Operator making his rounds, runs across something, can log in, get the work order produced right there, and get the system flowing towards fixing it. So where did we start? There's a lot of tools. We borrowed this from Aprion, who's our wireless provider, and where are we going after first? And I'll get into a little bit of it, but our focus primarily is on the security end of things and mustering, and that's really where we started. The other place where we started was turnarounds, and I'll talk a little bit about why did we start there. Back for those that were here in the decade from 2000 to 2010, when we did have a very, very poor variable cost position, and there was a heavy focus on fixed costs and a lot of efficiencies there. So we really, really squeezed our workforce, made them as efficient as we can. And in order to be able to try and convince somebody from a business case standpoint that you're going to get an efficiency gain out of a wireless, and go ahead and commit to one person less per shift. It's a very difficult thing to do. Nobody really wants to pony up a person in advance of a wireless system. In addition, safety and security with 9/11 and the Department of Homeland Security, they've put additional burdens on our systems, and from a mustering standpoint. So what we really started off with was leading with the safety and security projects. They don't need the ROI associated with them. You can start out small, and kind of what we did at Freeport is we have a 400-acre site, and what we call a donut, and we put it around the perimeter from a standpoint of security, and then we start to fill in those holes later on. What that does is it keeps the overall initial cost lower, and then you can fill it in with additional projects as you go along. So we led with security, and then we're moving towards mustering. So this is personnel tracking, making sure that we can in real time locate folks if there's an emergency. And that's going to be very important because we've got capital projects that are coming along, both to expand the existing facilities. So we've got a lot of increased people on site and a lot of folks that aren't really necessarily normally associated with the chemical industry, and we want to make sure we can track those folks. So we led with the video projects on security standpoint. Doesn't need the ROI for a return. following behind that with mustering. And then once you get that basic infrastructure and that hurdle, then you can go forward with the efficiency programs. The investment isn't as high. The commitment as far as the returns on the efficiency isn't as high. And then you can incrementally put those efficiency projects out there without committing to fixed cost reductions, which is primarily going to be in the personnel range. And so once you get to that point, now you've got the infrastructure in place. You've got your safety and security. You've led with it. You haven't had to prove yourself on an ROI project. You can put the efficiency projects in, and now you've got attrition starting to happen. And you can naturally absorb that attrition without having to have layoffs and ugly things like that. You can absorb that attrition, and you've got the new folks coming in that are going to have the efficiency because they're used to working with these tools, and you can naturally pick that efficiency up. So from a strategy standpoint, our approach here is leading with the non-ROI projects. We follow those with smaller ROI projects out in the individual units. And then as we get better with those systems, those efficiency systems, then we'll naturally attrit the folks that are going to be going to part-time and retiring anyways, and we'll gain the efficiencies down the road that way without measures of letting folks go. So that's kind of been our approach on how we're getting wireless in at the site. This is an overall viewpoint of a site plan, and I can tell you, as I said up front, when we first set off, and it was in Port Arthur back in probably 2008 or 9, we were getting ready for a turnaround. And again, we had some folks doing it over in the maintenance area. We had some folks that wanted to do it in the operations area, and we kind of had to rein them in and go from an overall standpoint and write a standard for the site and then write a North American standard so we could do that. And the other thing is, from a turnaround perspective, folks are willing to commit to on these big olefin plant turnarounds, to a half a day or a day less on the turnaround schedule. It's not a long-term commitment from an efficiency standpoint, and that's the other way you can get the project justified, because you can do it on a turnaround basis where large money is being spent over a short period of time. You can claim some efficiency gains during that turnaround, and then afterwards you have a system in place that you can use for safety, security, and operational ongoing efficiency projects later on. But from a standpoint of a site, we're doing this at our 3 major sites right now in Freeport, Port Arthur, and Geismar, and following those along. And we're doing the site assessments, and we're really in the middle of the site assessment right now. We've rolled out an automation strategy. Wireless is part of that automation strategy and where it fits in. And again, we're getting a common approach now in North America for all of our sites. And really, once we set it at those 3 major sites, we have about 100 sites in the U.S. The standard will be set for the rest of North America as well. So our lessons learned: don't lead with ROI projects. It's very difficult to get somebody who's really been through the 2000 to 2010 standpoint to commit to efficiency gains up front. So it's very difficult to get those justified and to commit to those savings. So we find to lead with safety and security and the human issues first, and then you can fill in the ROI projects after that. Start small. So in our case, we started with overall infrastructure on the outside of the plants, and then we're filling in the units where we didn't have coverage, and then you can incrementally build those projects up from there. Don't create siloed systems, and that's really what we had starting off. Is we had folks that were eager, and they were getting out there, and they were contacting this vendor or that vendor, and everybody was off doing their same thing. Really pull back and get yourself a standardized approach up front, or you're going to wind up with really a hodgepodge of systems out there that don't have a common unified approach. So infrastructure support. So one thing that we are doing is, from an overall standpoint, we don't have enough critical mass within BASF Corporation from an expertise standpoint. So we go to Apron for 24-hour support of maintenance of the system, for surveying the systems, and make sure that they're working okay. Because internally we don't have the expertise, nor do we have the critical mass yet to support full-time resources overseeing the wireless systems. So I think that was Well, results to date. Improved safety and security. Certainly we have mustering underway, and that's really a project that's near and dear to my heart. If anybody's been in an incident with on the chemical plants, and there were some recently in the news last year where you see people trying to account for people. As incident commander and site manager, that's one of the first things you've got to do is where is everybody? Are they in harm's way? So you got to ask yourself, where are they? Where were they last? Do we send people in after them? And what we're doing now is we've had mustering points in the past. Now we're going to have active mustering systems where people get within a certain distance of a mustering. We'll know that they arrived at the mustering station okay, and we also know that they passed into a unit, where they were in the unit, when they went in the unit, did they make it to a mustering, and so then we know whether or not we've got to go in after that. I've done this presentation before, and typically the question is, isn't that a sensitive issue? Yeah, for accounting for people. People think Big Brother's watching them, every step of the way. And I have easy questions for them. A, what would your family say? Would they want us to be able to know where you're at? And the answer is always yes. Do you want the people you work with to have a real localized and pinpoint position to come get you, or do you want them out there at risk searching for you? And so, people can't answer those questions without saying, yeah, my family wants me to come get me, and my friends, and I don't want my coworkers out there looking for me. So mustering is a very important project for us, and it's one that we're going to be putting in. And again, I think with the capital projects coming along, we're going to have a lot of inexperienced folks coming into the ranks that really don't know chemical plants, because there is going to be a big draw on the crafts in particular. And so having a system where we can account for them if there is an issue is going to be really important in the future. Obviously, maintenance cost metrics, asset efficiency, asset effectiveness, those are things that we'll be working on. Uptime, we're in a great variable cost position, so we want to squeeze as much out of our assets as we can, and these are tools that allow us to do it. Turnaround execution. The turnarounds have become much more distance between the turnarounds. They're less frequent, and of course, we want to try and drive as much efficiency as we can to get those turnarounds completed safely. And again, we did have an investment in less than 1% of a turnaround budget. It was a big turnaround with some significant efficiency gains.